Our first cabinet looks at the origin and development of the subject of heraldry in Canada. Heraldry began when the Europeans first came to Canada. The French arrived in Gaspé in about 1534, and the French Royal Arms were raised by Jacques Cartier at this time. After the British conquest, the British brought their own heraldry to Canada, and grants were made to Canadian institutions and individuals up until the establishment of the Canadian Heraldic Authority in 1988. The heraldry in Canada is a power of the Crown, and in the center of the top center of the case, we see a picture of Her Majesty the Queen, Queen of Canada. And below it are the Royal Arms of Canada, used by the Canadian government when they go about the Queen's business. This is a new version painted by Mrs. Cathy Savarin, the Fraser Herald at the Canadian Heraldic Authority, and has been in the news a bit lately due to the addition of the motto ribbon of the Order of Canada. The actual running of the Heraldic Authority is part of the Governor General's household. And at the top right-hand corner, we see a photograph of the Governor General, the Right Honorable Romeo LeBlanc, and his wife. Mr. LeBlanc's personal coat of arms is found below it, in which we see examples of his Acadian heritage, his viceregal position, and his New Brunswick place of origin. These were granted last year, I believe. On the left is the newly augmented arms of the Canadian Heraldic Authority. As I said before, the authority was set up in 1988 as part of the Governor General's household as a way of for Canadians to develop their own system of heraldry. And grants are made from the authority by the Chief Herald, Mr. Robert Watt, who is pictured immediately below the Royal Arms. The arms of the authority, moving back to the left-hand corner, should just show a plain maple leaf with a white shield in the middle of it, and on the top the lion from the crest of Canada, and new supporters have been added on the sides, being raven bears. These animals have been borrowed from mythology of our native peoples. On the right, we have the document establishing the Canadian Heraldic Authority in 1988. We've moved to the next cabinet. This is a cabinet which describes how to find out more about heraldry, and it notes that this exhibition has been sponsored by the Heraldry Society of Canada, Toronto branch, in conjunction with the Canadian Flag Association. The large item in this cabinet is the armorial banner of the Canadian Heraldic, of the Heraldry Society of Canada, and this is a flag based on the arms granted to the Heraldry Society in, I believe, the early 1970s. In the lower part of the cabinet, we have a selection of journals, magazines, newsletters, to do with heraldry, which are published in Canada and around the world. The Heraldry Society of Canada is the main voice of heraldic research in Canada, and it undertakes many educational initiatives, such as the exhibit we have today in Robarts Library. This exhibit is taking place at Robarts Library in the University of Toronto, and as such, we have made a special display of arms that are found around the University of Toronto. U of T is perhaps Canada's richest university in terms of heraldry, not only in the number of related institutions which have had official grants of arms, but also in the display of heraldry around the university. Much of this was due to earlier this century, in the mid-century, due to the great Canadian artist based in Toronto, Alexander Scott Carter. And some of the photographs we have show his work in Harthouse. In the center of the screen here, we have a few photographs of his shields of the universities of the British Empire and their allies in the First World War, which he painted around 1919, 1920 in the Great Hall of Harthouse. Scott Carter also painted a wonderful map of the university in 1934, and this is found in the map room of Harthouse. the photographs of the map are in the left-hand side of the screen. The arms of the University of Toronto were designed in the 1850s by the president, Sir Daniel Wilson. At that time, they included a maple tree crest and supporters, and a slightly different motto. He also designed arms of University College, with which the University of Toronto had a special relationship. The arms therefore reflected this. Even though they were in different colors, they were essentially a rearrangement of the design. The two arms, the University of Toronto on the left and University College on the right, are seen in the large photograph in the center of the screen. This is found in the West Hall of University College. Both of these arms were officially granted by the Kings of Arms of England in 1917, 2 years after the first Canadian grant to a university, which was the University of British Columbia. And we see further examples of the University of Toronto arms in the top left-hand corner on a pamphlet, and in the bottom left-hand corner on a wall plaque. As I mentioned before, many institutions at the University of Toronto have also received grants of arms. In the lower part of the right-hand side of the case, we see a few examples of the arms of Trinity College, an affiliated Anglican college with the university, originally founded by Bishop John Strawn, first Anglican Bishop of Toronto, and they are essentially an adaptation of his arms. These arms can be seen in the form of a candle, a greeting card, a sweater badge, and just on a color photocopy. Immediately above the color photocopy of the Trinity arms, the arms of its sister college, St. Hilda's, the only college at the University of Toronto to have arms granted by the Canadian Heraldic Authority. That was in 1989. And around it, there are other colleges which have received grants of arms. We have a picture of the Massey College Arms, a graduate college, which was granted arms in 1964. Above it, the part-time undergraduate college, Wordsworth College. And on the far right, at the top, we have St. Michael's College, a Roman Catholic affiliated university college. Again, its arms are based on the arms of the first bishop, this being the Roman Catholic Bishop of Toronto. Below it, there's a photograph of the arms of Wycliffe College, another Anglican seminary affiliated with the university. And below that photograph, in the bottom right-hand corner, are the arms of the Faculty of Forestry of the university. And there are several other colleges which have arms at the university. I point out Arundel College, coming back to the top left-hand corner, which is located in Mississauga and affiliated with the University of Toronto. Robarts Library, being Canada's largest library, has an excellent selection of books on heraldry, and we show a few of them in the lower part of the case. Some of these deal with international heraldry, which I will be speaking about in a moment. For centuries, heraldry in Canada was essentially the heraldry of France, or later of England and Scotland. One of the advantages of the Canadian Heraldic Authority, set up in 1988, is the ability of heraldry in Canada now to absorb influences from around the world in its symbol system. At the bottom of the case, on the left bottom, we see a couple of examples of earlier grants from England, they being to a gentleman in Islington named John Setchell, and to an institution in Toronto, being the Hospital for Sick Children. The hospital is on the right, along with its flag, and Mr. Setchell's arms are on the left. These are examples of arms from the British system, from the English system of heraldry, I should say. However, above it, we see some examples of international heraldry in the Canadian context. See some paintings of arms of one of our members, Mr. Derwin Mack of Toronto. Mr. Mack is an accountant and a Canadian of Chinese heritage, and so these elements have been incorporated into his coat of arms, which he painted and has lent to us for this exhibit. Underneath the example of Austrian heraldry, we have a photograph of a gentleman from northern Ontario who is of Ukrainian background, and the arms are essentially an adaptation of ancient Ukrainian arms. To round out this case, we have examples of heraldry in use. This particular grant of arms is to a high school in Scarborough, Sir Oliver Mowat Collegiate Institute, and we can see how this school has used its arms on a coffee cup, on a t-shirt, on various programs, business cards, stationery, and so forth. Our final main display case of heraldry deals with heraldry in use in Canada today. In the center we have a poster issued by the government, the Department of Heritage, showing Canadian symbols, surrounded by examples of the arms and flags and floral emblems of the provinces of Canada, as well as the nation itself at the top. These are designed to be posted in classrooms. Around it we have various examples of heraldry granted by the Canadian Heraldic Authority. On the right we have examples such as Canadian municipalities from Ottawa to West Vancouver to Northumberland County to the town of Markham, to schools, Lakefield College School at the top and Upper Canada College at the bottom. Organizations such as the Victorian Order of Nurses, the National Council of Women, a badge granted to an Indian nation in Alberta. The curious arms in the center of the right side are the Murchie's Tea and Coffee Company of Vancouver. And we also have several examples of personal arms. On the left-hand side of the case, we have a few other examples of arms to Canadian municipalities, including Metropolitan Toronto and the City of Regina. At the top of the left-hand corner of the case, the arms granted to the Ontario Legislature, located very close to the university. And in the bottom of the case, more examples of books on heraldry.
In this display we have coats of arms typical of the 17th and 18th centuries, as well as a display of weapons that were used in the 1750 period of the battle between Wolfe and Montcalm. From the bottom left, there's a brown Bess musket draped in the Fraser Highlanders tartan. We also have hanging in front of the Lion Rampant Royal Flag of Scotland. We have two of the pole weapons, Lochaber axe, which was used against horsemen, and also a espontoon, which was a long spear-like device used in place of horses, which came later in later types of battles. Hanging down are the two of the swords, a back sword and a broadsword, again typically used by the Highlanders when they were fighting as part of Wolfe's contingent. These are basically typical weapons of that period of warfare.
What we have seen up to now has been a display of armorial or heraldic flags. And behind me you'll see a display of Chinese flags which predate heraldry by perhaps many hundreds of years, if not thousands, and which are unrelated to heraldry. And I'll show you some of these examples. For example, China as a modern nation has had flags only since the British broke into China in the early 19th century. But you find, for example, the first flag was a dragon flag to represent the empire. Later, in the Republic, this five-striped flag emerged. Later on, the communists took over with their 5 stars, 5 and red being lucky combinations for the Chinese. Before the communists, of course, and still flying in Taiwan, is the white sun, blue sky flag. The study of flags actually has a name coined in 1959, and the word is Vexillology. I like to allow people to remember this name by talking about Roman Empire films such as Ben-Hur or Antony and Cleopatra, where you saw perhaps a Roman soldier carrying what looked like a brass curtain rod with a piece of cloth. That piece of cloth, which represented the cavalry or some important personage, was called a vexillum. And from that word, we have vexillology, which is the study of flags. Organized since 1959, there have been now 16 international congresses of vexillology, and their various journals are seen here. The voice of vexillology in Canada is the Canadian Flag Association, now in its 10th year. The journal of the Canadian Flag Association is FlagScan, the covers of which journal are seen in this display. FlagScan is a quarterly publication of 25 to 30 pages dealing with all aspects of the study of flags in Canada and indeed in the world. The design of flags is called vexillography, and good flag design, and there is bad flag design. Some examples of bad flag design include flags which have to write the name of the place that it represents. These are city flags, by the way, of Canada, municipal flags. And on some of these you'll find words. Words which cannot be seen from a distance, words cannot be seen from the opposite side, and if the symbol is a good one, why do we need words? Or we can look at the flag of Scarborough. You see the red maple leaf on a white background, above a stylization of the famous Scarborough Bluffs. That says a lot for Scarborough. Here we have further displays of flags. The first one is of Canadian interest. It's the RCMP flag, very handsome flag, based on the red ensign, the color red, a color prized very much and esteemed very much by the Indians of the Northwest. And in the place of honor in the canton is the RCMP device of the buffalo's head. The place of honor, by the way, is the canton on the flag. Our next display shows controversial flags. Both of these flags were at one time terrorist flags, but now they are national flags. Israel on the left and Palestine. This display shows many of our Indian and Métis flags. There is not one flag for Indians, but most bands and nations have devised their own. Our last display shows the Slavic flags of Central and Eastern Europe, and this is an example of red, white, and blue, the Slavic colors being found in many of the flags. We thank the Canadian Flag Association and the Heraldry Society of Canada Toronto branch for setting up this display.